Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
I've been amazed by our author today because this is so special. So Marjory Lyons, who's author of Think You Can't Write, Think Again, a foolproof guide to getting your story written, is here in the studio, and she's here with her collaborating publisher. But welcome to our show. We are now on Facebook Live, Marjory.
Great, that's wonderful.
Yeah, and we're going to talk to you about, I have a lot of your books, and we'll talk about what you actually do, but I'm now going to come over to Tim, who is the collaborating publisher.
Morning.
And by the way, he's also your son, but we'll keep him as a professional because that's what he is.
Absolutely.
So, what I want to do, though, let's just I'm moving you back and forth here.
Yes.
I just want to talk about, as a young child, did you have a writing ability? How did all this happen?
Yes. I have it in me. I must write, Actually, I did write when the first thing I can remember, I was about 7 years old, and I wrote what we would call a newsletter. I called it a newspaper in those days. It was so long ago, there wasn't even any such thing as a newsletter, but it was a newspaper for the family. There were several family members living near one another, including a gaggle of cousins. And speaking of gaggles, all of us, we had kittens, so that my cousins had kittens and they were have kittens and so forth. So I wrote a newsletter about the kittens and the different things that we would be doing, dressing them up. I remember we would take them, we would baptize them with milk, put a little milk on their heads. And but their father, the father of the cousins, whose name was Charles Robinson, has passed away now, but he was a playwright, and he was so interesting to me. He would go to one of the little houses on the cliff over Long Island Sound every morning, and he'd go off and write. And I thought, wow, that's great. So my great-aunt Peggy, had an Oliver typewriter, which is a monster manual typewriter. And I remember I would have to get up on a cushion on her chair, and of course two-finger typed this newspaper for all the friends and people and neighbors and my family, the cousins and so forth. I wish I had a copy of it, but I don't. So I did start. And then when I was maybe in fourth grade or something, I remember there was a DAR contest, Daughters of the American Revolution contest, to write about something colonial. And I wrote a piece, and it was entered in the contest in Suffolk County, Long Island, where I grew up, which is way out toward Montauk, and I won. And the next year, my teacher thought I should try again in another subject, and I won a second year. And I won a book as a prize, and I still have that book about colonial America, So it was a tiny little school, 50 children in the school in Miller Place, Long Island. There'll be people who know that. It's near Port Jefferson, which has a big harbor. But this was Miller Place, where I grew up, my mother grew up, her mother grew up.
Well, I'm so glad that this has happened because when I first found the book that you and Beverly Holden Johns wrote, I was fascinated because so many people do want to write, and they are afraid. They think that being a writer has to take, that you had a lot of courses in college.
Right. That's right.
And from now your experience with helping people write their own book, even to think about, can I write a book? So your book is not very large, which I liked. It's a paperback edition. Yeah. And it has probably about 150 some odd pages.
That's right.
But people can pick it up and they can really learn what you were saying about decades, which I thought was very interesting before, that if we think in decades, because it's too large a task for somebody that's not skilled. Huge. But even for you too, in a sense, as the person going in there to help them, you probably say, well, let's think in little bits and pieces,
That
and then
helps.
we'll make it right.
Because when you think of your life, it's sort of overwhelming. No matter what age, you could be 30, you could be 80, whatever it is. You've got all this stuff that's happened, you know. And how can you begin to get that organized and begin to figure out what you're going to say, much less write a word on paper? So if you allow yourself to think in decades, and in my book we do have ways that you can actually write in the book and put your different achievements during each decade, and it helps you think about the important things that happened that helped you become the person that you are.
So I want to run over here now to Tim, because Tim is the person that has to, even though you have, your mom, of course, is the author and the writer, but you are what we call a collaborator. You help publish. It's very hard to tell people, I would think, that what they have to say, certain parts of that is not going to be interesting enough for the book. Right? He's put his little eyes up, because this is very personal. But it sounds like you really understand what a book has to have, and they're interested in getting the book out, so they have to listen to you. So your mom brings in, as the author, she brings a lot of things to you. What do you say to her? Let's say she brings somebody, down here, I'm going to back up. We have a lot of people who have been in the Holocaust.
Right.
And I have reviewed quite a few of these books. And there's a lot of emotion with that. So your mom is now, I'm not going to call her your mom anymore. I'm going to call her Marjorie, because that's really more professional. So Marjorie does a lot of the interviewing, and she brings things to you. How do you deal with this if it's not exactly what you think she should be getting? Because this is you do it as a professional.
Right. I'm more involved with the technical part of getting the text, the manuscript, prepared for the printer. So first is the writing, then the editing, and then the publishing portion. So those are the 3 steps of a book. So I'm involved in the third portion, which is to get that text, those words, insert the photos, determine the layout, the design cover, the size, the kind of paper, all those things that we talk to the client about. And then it goes to a particular printer. We have different printers we work with, depending on the kind of book that it is.
We have Jamie Titcomb is watching. Bring them on camera. I don't bring anyone else on camera, but thanks for watching, Jamie. We'll keep going with this. Now, what you're saying is extremely important, and I can see where somebody they may even have written a book already.
Right.
So they don't really, I don't know do they still need Marjorie?
Yes, they do, because we all need a sounding board. And when a story is written, life, novel, whatever it is, it needs to be edited by someone who's objective to make it a smooth story, so it's interesting.
Yes.
So Marjorie, I'm some questions. I know you work with Beverly, of course, who's your co-author and all, but do you work with her on everything?
I met Beverly when she came into my writing workshops, which I conduct nearby in Pompano and in Maine. And so we had that kind of association. She's an educator, a speaker, a writer, and she came in to write some fiction stories. She's published 22 books in the field of special needs children. So Beverly Holden Johns is known throughout the United States for all of her speeches and talks in that regard. So we started the idea of writing something together based on what she has done in her life and what I've done in my life, my writings and my teachings, working with students. Of course, I was a college professor for a number of years, as well as having, as I said, writing workshops.
Let's go back. So your college professorship,
Yes.
What did you teach?
I taught organizational leadership and a lot of English classes. I taught for the master's program, people getting their English degrees in English, composition, literature, and so forth. But then at the doctoral level, they were getting organizational leadership degrees, educational leadership. So I did all of that for a long time. And Beverly has been a school principal and head of the department and various things of that nature. And so she stayed in the educational field, public education. I have not stayed in the public education. I went into college work. I was at Nova Southeastern University for 22 years. So maybe
down here.
Yes, down here. Maybe some of my students are listening. I would love to know that.
They'll get on there because you'll put them there. But I want to just ask you a question.
Yes.
As an author who's dealing with another author,
yes.
and you're not in the same office,
mm-hmm.
do you each
do
assign, why don't you take this and I'll take this? How do you do that?
We did that. We sat together and decided which chapters we kind of felt good about. And we wound up with a table of contents, which Tim likes to talk about because that's organized, and he's an organized guy. We decided which chapters we would each write. And I wrote that in the introduction. I wrote the first half, and Bev wrote the second half, based on the lectures we give, the pieces that we have written. So mine had to do with why write your story, how to write your story, what to write in your story, and who will read your story. She picked it up and went on and said, help me how I can get started, which is the point here. You know, the title of the book, long title, is, as you said, Think You Can't Write, Think Again, a foolproof guide to getting your story written at last. And the at last part is the kicker, because people think about it and they don't do it. So Bev and I decided we were going to try to figure out how to put a book together that would really inspire them to get started. You mentioned the decades chart before. People can go by decades and write down what happened in a decade, and that will give them an idea of what they can write about to begin, to get started.
So here's a funny question.
What?
Some people may come to you because they want to write a book.
Yes.
And you start talking to them, and as creative as you are, it's for their benefit, so it doesn't have to be as glorious as some of the books, and we'll talk about some of the books that you have produced.
Yes.
Do you ever tell someone, I know their answer, no, there's not really anything here that I can do with.
I don't dare do that.
I know that.
But you want to.
No. Let's be kind. Let's be kind.
Yeah.
Now, the fact is that I truly believe everyone has a story. Everyone has a story in there.
They do.
And they do. It's my job to get it out of them. It's interesting. You can have conversations with people, and they'll tell you something or another, and then they'll do something which is, as we say in the theater, just an aside, something that doesn't matter very much. But that's the essence. This one fellow, Sam Lane, was a wonderful gentleman who we've now lost, unfortunately. He was 93 when he passed away. But he started out as a poor little boy in Arkansas.
I'm just going to put this
book, good. That's lovely. I think his family will be thrilled with that.
So let me get this so there's no light on it. But
yeah,
it's Sam's story, and it's by Samuel Lane. So it's always by them.
It is by them. But I must say, I wrote every word of the book. I read them back to him. He approved of what I wrote, so there was nothing that was out of whack here at all. But I was able to listen to him and hear his stories. He became a very successful insurance executive in the annuity business. But he started as a poor little boy in Arkansas, actually literally barefoot, working in the farm and so forth. But as an aside, he talked with me about selling peanuts on the train that would stop in his little town in Arkansas when he was 5 years old. Isn't that precious? 5 years old. He was an entrepreneur at 5 years old. So, of course, that was the first story that I put into the book. This characterized this little boy who became a successful entrepreneur and started an insurance company that was still is recognized nationwide.
Now we have another watcher, Jamie Banner. Oh, Jenny. Oh,
Jenny.
yeah, I know who Jenny is.
You know Jenny?
Jenny. So Jenny Banner is watching. So let's now go over to Tim. So, Tim, you laughed when I said, is it possible that some of the stories, as cute as they are, I mean, a lot of people are not going to buy the book. And people have to understand that, right? So what do you tell them?
Yeah. Well, this book
different.
Is different.
This is different.
This is how to get your book written.
Right.
Think You Can't Write.
Right.
The Sam's
story
book are memoirs, and most of the time they are written for the grandchildren or the great-grandchildren.
Good point.
Because, we all like Grandpa and Grandma, but how do they start?
Yeah, they don't even know them.
They don't know them. They don't know that they sold peanuts on the train way back when. They don't know that they had to pick cotton as a little boy, which he did. And they just think of them as old people that take them to the park and take them to the zoo. Well, there's lots more about Grandma and Grandpa than that. So these stories are really written for the next generation.
So in other words, when people are listening and they say, gee, I've been looking for someone like this that would help me write my story.
Yeah.
So we're going to give away, because I do want to give a way for people to do this. So let's do this. So I'm going to have them get in touch with you.
Okay.
Because that way you can then guide them to Marjory. So the phone number is 802-683-9374. And I'll repeat that again. I think maybe I'll also go to the website.
Yeah.
The website is tellingyourstory.com. That's easy.
That's right.
Tellingyourstory.com.
That's
Right.
And if you are listening and you have this burning desire, or maybe it hasn't been burning, but now it's starting
Thinking
to
about it.
get sizzled, that you
Yeah.
want someone to help you know that get all those little pieces together.
Yep.
You don't have to do this right now. What
You're
you have
not
to do is,
alone.
that's right. Someone's going to sit with you and ask you the right questions.
Right.
And after you buy the book, see, I don't think you should buy the book only to buy the book. I think you should buy the book and then make that call and get someone to help you too.
We can help.
As good as the book is, I think now that I've met Marjory, I think they need Marjory. And, and it's not that how expensive it is. It's you have a life, and many people are in their 70s and 80s, and as you said so succinctly and beautifully, it isn't really, you're not going to sell a lot of books, so just don't think about that, right?
It's for the family. It's for posterity.
And for them.
It's for them, yeah.
Can you imagine even for them that they now have something they can look at, read it, and say, I did that.
Yeah.
So this is an important thing, and I've had people who've actually, because we have so many elders down here, Tim, we have a lot of people who say, oh, I'll bring a video camera and I'm going to do this for your family.
Right.
You have to be a real experienced person to understand, number one, what questions are right.
That's right.
You have to have a videographer.
Yep.
It can get very expensive, but if they could have a book, which would be there forever, right, compared to that, I think people should be on video too. It's nice to have that.
Yes, it is. It is.
And I'm going to ask Marjory now, moving over here.
Sure.
So, Marjory, do you ever have both of somebody who, for instance, Sam's story, and I just want to talk about some of your other books
Or
here.
Sue.
Yeah, right, but even Abe Spieler. Abe Spieler.
Mm-hmm.
You can call me Brooklyn. I'm going to take a picture of this, too.
Yeah,
you can call me, let's see, let me do it this way.
He used to sit and look at the Brooklyn Bridge when he was in school, wondering what was going to happen with his life. And he became very well-to-do.
Right, so now his family has that. He has it, but also it could come alive with videographers. I mean, do you get them to do a video?
There's so much missing in a video.
In addition.
In addition, we do in addition. In fact, we have. Back to Sam again for a minute. We did actually video Sam and his wife, Lucille, sit together in their private home in the den where they had the fish they had caught were hanging on the wall and all the things they loved to talk about, both of them. So we had a long period of taking a video there. So they could give us all the little intricate details of how they felt about things, and they argued about the weight of the fish and who caught what and that kind of stuff. So the interaction between the husband and wife was wonderful. That, if you're a writer, you have to grasp that and include that on the written page and reflect upon it so that the reader understands the relationship within that marriage and the relationship that the individual would have with the family, as Tim has mentioned, so that we always have an opportunity to do some videos. And I'm a writer. I'm as I've mentioned, I'm an actress as well, so I understand about the importance of the human person conveying information. You can do both. You can do both. The thing that is permanent, is the written word. Some of these books that I have done through Telling Your Story will appear in libraries because they are stories about things that happened in whatever vicinity, Fort Lauderdale, for example. The one by Sue Ning Barry is actually being read in China, where her family and relatives still live. She lives in Fort Lauderdale herself. She'll soon be 86 years old, and there's an interest in what her early life was like as the Japanese were invading China in the 1930s and 40s. And so the story of her life is one that only she can tell in only her own way. My job is to put it together, to organize it, to put it together in an intriguing way. The cover on her book, that is, by the way, it's available as an ebook too, isn't it, Tim?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. The cover of her book shows her earliest picture, and there she is, a little girl, 5 years old. And, however, during that time period, when they were fleeing the Japanese, the invading Japanese, nobody took pictures. They were running for their life. This was a terrible time in that history, as her family, her father was an important person. He was actually something like the head of the Supreme Court in the free China, not the China that we have today. That's a communist China. But this was a free China, a democracy they were trying to set up. So her history is very interesting. And the local bookstores and libraries want those books.
So I'm going to take a picture of your book, though.
Yes,
that's
the
really
book.
important.
This is how to write your book.
This is a very important.
Help.
Yes, that's very important. But I just had a few questions about what you were just saying.
Yes.
So if someone comes to you, how do you know how long? I know your experience, but how do you know how long a book is going to take? I guess you have to have a little consulting meeting. You talk to them. Then, it could take a year. It could take 5 years, depending on what you have.
Well, it's important to please the book client, the person who is telling the story. It's important to be accurate. It's important for me to interview them a number of times. Tim worked with me doing the interviewing, sometimes taking videos at that time to get the details. Then we write it, and the revision takes some time to make sure that I have shaped it. I've got the voice. You know about that as a writer yourself, the voice of the individual and the flow of the narrative of the life. That all needs to be put together, and it does take a year from the time you begin to the time the book is published. So it takes a year, and perhaps more than that sometimes.
And so I'm going to move over to Tim again, as you're the collaborator and publisher, and he is a family member. And it must be thrilling for you as a son, we'll put you in the family member, to have a mother who now is, in her 80s and who is as spry as anyone in their 50s or younger.
Good.
And you've lived with her for a long time. I don't mean live with her, but it's your mother.
Right.
Yeah.
So have you seen an increase as she's aged in spirit and excitement?
I guess yes.
You better say yes.
I thought so.
She's always been a very active person, always been, and that's the key. Is that you have to keep your mind going and your body. And this is a wonderful part of her life right now because she's sharing what's been in there since a little girl. She's sharing that with others now, how to write, why to write, and to get it out. One thing I wanted to say, one thing we do is help. Everyone procrastinates. And one thing we do is help get it done. We meet with them every week. We get a schedule going. It's not, we don't meet every number of months. We meet every week, get the information, come back with, it's a real project. So it may take a year, but that's the long end of it. We like to get it done, the information in the first couple months.
Short period.
Then we go away and write it. Then we come back and make sure it's correct. And then, of course, the printing actually takes a little while.
So you're dealing with people down here. But what about if someone's up north? How can you do that?
Well, we can do it. We can go there. They can come here if they're snowbirds.
Yeah,
so
but
forth.
you should
We
be
work
with somebody to do this. This isn't really over the phone, is it?
No.
This is in person, looking at them,
That's
understanding
right.
what
and
it is.
And it's about an hour at each time. That's about the maximum people can concentrate.
I see. And, we will, of course, we have a couple of minutes left, Marjory,
Yes.
but I just want to say your name again and Beverly's. So my guest this morning is Marjory Diane Lyons,
Yes.
Dr. Lyons, PhD,
That's right.
and Beverly Holden Johns, who has a master's degree and has written over 20 books. And so these are really experienced people. I'm so glad that you've come here this morning, because I can tell you right now that there are people who are listening, and this is an opportunity that I don't think I have offered anybody before. And I can tell you right now, looking at some of the books they have done, this is what you've been waiting for. And it's a good thing to talk to them. And I'm going to tell you again, the website. The website is tellingyourstory.com. Tellingyourstory.com. Get that down, write it. Remember, this is Pencil Talk Radio. Just don't, put it on a little sticky. But I want to thank both of you, Tim and Marjorie,
Thank
for
you,
being
Anita.
here.
Thank you so much,
And we'll
Anita.
see you again.
That's
And
lovely.
I'm going to say goodbye to you also. I mean,
Thank
I
you.
usually put two people together, but that's right. Some
Oh,
people
here
get
we
a little
are.
nauseous and sick as they go back and
We're
forth.
going to
But
go outside.
thank you. But now you'll be on
Thank you very
Facebook
much.
Live, and we thank you. And